The Corvani thought they understood pain. They had conquered 17 star systems. They had broken species that had stood for millennia. Their interrogation chambers were legendary across the galactic arm, places where even the hardiest warriors begged for death within hours. The Corvani High Command believed, with the absolute certainty of apex predators, that they had mastered the science of suffering. Then, they captured Marcus Cole. He was nothing special, by human standards. 34 years old. Former construction worker from a small town in Montana. Drafted into the United Earth Defense Force when the Corvani invaded, given 8 weeks of basic training, and shipped to the front lines of Kepler 442b. His unit had been overwhelmed in the first wave. Of the 200 soldiers who had landed with him, Marcus was one of 11 captured alive. The Corvani didn't know what to make of humans yet. This was their first major engagement with Earth's forces, and they were still cataloging the species, still learning its weaknesses. The prisoners were a valuable resource, subjects for study, tools for understanding how to break humanity's spirit before the main invasion fleet arrived. Marcus remembered the moment of his capture with crystalline clarity. The plasma bolt that had torn through his left shoulder. The alien soldiers surrounding him, their chitinous faces expressionless as they bound his hands with energy restraints. The long march to the detention facility, where he had been stripped, examined, and thrown into a cell barely large enough to lie down in. For 3 days, they left him alone. On the 4th day, the interrogations began. The Corvani interrogator was named Vexen AR. He was considered one of the finest practitioners of his art, a being who had extracted confessions from species that communicated through pheromones and broken the minds of creatures that experienced time non-linearly. He approached the human specimen with professional curiosity, noting the primitive physiology, the soft skin, the apparent fragility of the creature before him. "You will tell me everything," Vexen AR said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into flat, mechanical English. "The locations of your bases. The strength of your forces. The weaknesses of your leadership. All of it." Marcus looked up from where he sat on the cold metal floor. His shoulder wound had been treated, they needed him alive and coherent, after all, but his body ached from the cramped conditions and lack of food. He was exhausted, frightened, and utterly alone. But something else was there too. Something that had been building in him since the moment of his capture. A cold, quiet voice in the back of his mind that whispered, "They can break your body. They cannot touch what you choose to keep." "I'm Private First Class Marcus Cole," he said. "Serial number 7741 Echo 339. That's all you're getting." Vexen AR made a sound that his translator rendered as a chuckle. "They all say that. At first." The first session lasted 6 hours. They used electrical stimulation, targeting the nerve clusters that their initial scans had identified as pain centers. They used temperature, extreme cold, then burning heat. They used sound, frequencies that seemed to vibrate Marcus's very bones. They used isolation and sensory deprivation, leaving him in absolute darkness for what felt like days. Marcus screamed. He wept. He begged, not for mercy, but for it to stop, just for a moment, just long enough to catch his breath. His body betrayed him in every way a body could be betrayed. But, when Vexen AR asked his questions, Marcus gave him nothing. Serial number 7741 Echo 339. The interrogator was intrigued. Most species broke within the first 2 hours. The human was clearly suffering, the biometric readings confirmed that he was experiencing agony beyond what many beings could survive, and yet something kept him anchored. Some reservoir of resistance that Vexen AR had not anticipated. "Interesting," the Corvani said, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "We will continue tomorrow." The sessions continued for 19 days. Each day, they found new ways to hurt him. The Corvani were creative, methodical, almost artistic in their application of suffering. They learned the geography of human pain with the precision of cartographers mapping an unknown continent. They discovered that humans could survive far more damage than their appearance suggested. They found that the threshold of what a human mind could endure extended far beyond their initial projections. And, still, Marcus gave them nothing. "Why do you resist?" Vexnar asked on the 15th day, genuine puzzlement in his synthesized voice. "You gain nothing from this. Your silence will not save your species. Your comrades have already broken. We have extracted significant intelligence from the other prisoners. Your suffering serves no tactical purpose." Marcus hung from the restraints that suspended him above the floor, blood dripping from a dozen wounds. His left eye was swollen shut. 3 of his ribs were cracked. His voice, when it came, was a ragged whisper. "You're right. It doesn't matter. The information doesn't matter. Whether I talk or not, you're still going to do what you're going to do." "Then, why?" Marcus raised his head, and, in that moment, Vexnar saw something in the human's remaining eye that made him take an involuntary step backward. It was not defiance, exactly. Not hatred. It was something colder, something more absolute. "Because this is mine," Marcus said. "This choice. This moment. Everything else, my body, my life, my future, you can take all of it. But, you can't take this. You can't make me surrender what I choose to keep. And, I choose to keep this one thing. You will not break me. Not because it matters. Not because it changes anything. But, because it's mine." Vexnar stared at him for a long moment. In 2 centuries of practice, he had never encountered anything quite like this. The human wasn't resisting out of hope or duty or even spite. He was resisting because resistance itself had become his identity. He had found something inside himself that was untouchable, unreachable, beyond the scope of any pain that could be inflicted. "Remarkable," the interrogator said softly. "Truly remarkable." On the 20th day, everything changed. The facility's alarms began screaming at 0347 hours, local time. Marcus jerked awake in his cell, his battered body protesting the sudden movement. Through the narrow slit that served as his window, he could see the sky lit up with weapons fire, human weapons fire. Plasma bolts in blue rather than the Corvani green. A rescue operation. Earth's forces had found them. The battle raged for hours. Marcus listened to the sounds of combat, the explosions and, screaming, the periodic shuddering of the building as heavy ordnance struck nearby. He waited in his cell, too weak to stand, knowing that rescue could come at any moment or that the Corvani could decide to execute their prisoners rather than let them be liberated. The door to his cell exploded inward. A Corvani soldier stood in the doorway, weapon raised, but not pointed at Marcus. The alien was wounded, green ichor leaking from multiple injuries, and there was something in its posture that spoke of desperation rather than aggression. "Human," the soldier said, its translator crackling with static. "You will come. Now." Marcus stared at the alien. His body screamed at him to stay down, to wait for rescue, to let this play out without him. But, something made him struggle to his feet. "Why?" "The facility is lost. Commander Vexnar has ordered evacuation. You are valuable. A subject of study. You will be transported to the secondary site." Marcus felt a cold laugh building in his chest. After everything they had done to him, they still wanted to keep studying him. Like he was a lab rat that had proven unexpectedly resilient. "No," he said. The soldier's weapon came up. "You will comply, or you will die." "Then, I'll die." The words came out flat, matter of fact. Marcus meant them absolutely. He had spent 20 days proving to himself that there was a core of him that could not be touched. Now he would prove it one final time. He would not be taken. He would not be studied further. He would not give them one more moment of data, one more sample of human suffering. The Corvani soldier hesitated. In that hesitation, Marcus saw something unexpected: fear. Not of him, he was a broken, half-dead prisoner who could barely stand. Fear of something else. Fear of what he represented. "They're afraid of us," Marcus realized. "Not our weapons. Not our ships. They're afraid of this. They're afraid of what we can endure. The ceiling collapsed. Marcus didn't remember the next few minutes clearly. There was fire and debris and shouting in multiple languages. Human soldiers were pouring into the facility, engaging the remaining Corvani defenders. Someone grabbed him, hauled him over their shoulder, carried him through corridors thick with smoke and the smell of burning. "We've got survivors," a voice shouted. "Multiple prisoners, requesting immediate evac." Marcus passed out somewhere between the facility and the extraction point. His last conscious thought was a simple one, delivered in that cold, quiet voice that had sustained him through 20 days of hell: "You survived. Now survive what comes next." What came next was a military hospital on Earth's lunar colony, 3 months of surgeries and rehabilitation, and a medal ceremony that Marcus barely remembered. The Earth Defense Force made much of his resistance, holding him up as an example of human determination in the face of alien cruelty. They called him a hero. Marcus didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had been broken in every way that mattered and had somehow found a single unbreakable thread to hold on to. The war continued around him, and he was deemed unfit for combat duty. Too much physical damage, the doctors said. Too much psychological trauma. They were right about the physical damage. His left arm never fully recovered its strength. He walked with a permanent limp. His eye had been saved, but his vision was impaired. He was a shadow of the man who had been captured on Kepler 442b. But the doctors were wrong about his spirit. 6 months after his rescue, Marcus volunteered for a program that most considered suicide, the Long March Initiative. Deep reconnaissance into Corvani-held territory. Small teams, minimal support, gathering intelligence on enemy positions. The survival rate was estimated at 12%. The selection officer looked at Marcus's file, then looked at the scarred, limping man standing before him. "You know the odds," she said. "I do. You've been through enough. No one would blame you for sitting this out." Marcus smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "With respect, ma'am, you don't understand. I'm not volunteering because I think I can survive. I'm volunteering because I've already proven to myself that survival isn't the point. The Corvani tried to break me, and they failed. Not because I'm strong. Not because I'm brave. Because I found the part of me that can't be broken, and now I know it's there." The officer was quiet for a long moment. "The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," she said finally. "Is that it?" "Something like that. Welcome to the Long March, Private Cole." The training was brutal. Marcus's body protested every day, every exercise, every endless mile of forced marches through hostile terrain simulations. His injuries had left him slower, weaker, less capable than the other recruits. By every objective measure, he should have washed out in the first week. He didn't. Because physical capability, the instructors learned, was only part of what made a Long March operative. The other part, the more important part, was something that couldn't be measured or trained. It was the ability to endure. To keep moving when the body screamed for rest. To make decisions when the mind was clouded with exhaustion and fear. To hold on to purpose when everything else had been stripped away. Marcus had spent 20 days learning exactly how much he could endure. The final evaluation was a 72-hour exercise through the most hostile terrain the program could simulate, a stretch of Nevada desert modified with alien environmental conditions. Extreme temperature variations. Toxic atmosphere that required breathing apparatus. Predatory creatures released to hunt the candidates. The objective was simple: survive. Most candidates attempted to conserve energy, find shelter, wait out the clock. It was the logical approach. The smart approach. Marcus walked. He walked through the scorching days and the freezing nights. He walked when his legs burned and his lungs screamed for clean air. He walked when the predators circled, not running, not hiding, just walking with the steady, implacable pace of a man who had decided that nothing would stop him. On the 47th hour, one of the predators, a genetically modified hunting beast twice his size, blocked his path. Marcus didn't slow down. The beast charged. Marcus sidestepped, drove his combat knife into its throat, and kept walking. Blood streaming down his arm, knife still in hand, eyes fixed on the horizon. The observation team watched in stunned silence. "What the hell is he?" one of them whispered. The commanding officer had read Marcus's file 3 times. She had seen the footage from his interrogation, footage that the Corvani had inadvertently left behind when they evacuated. She had watched a man being systematically destroyed over the course of 20 days, and she had watched that same man refuse to break. "He's what we need," she said quietly. "Exactly what we need." Marcus graduated from the Long March program at the top of his class. Not because he was the fastest or strongest or most skilled, he wasn't, not even close. But because the instructors recognized something in him that transcended physical metrics. They called it operational tenacity. The ability to complete a mission regardless of obstacles, regardless of cost, regardless of personal survival. His first assignment came 3 weeks later, a solo reconnaissance mission into Corvani-controlled space. Objective: penetrate enemy lines on the occupied world of Thessaly 4, gather intelligence on a suspected weapons development facility, and transmit findings to Earth Command. Expected mission duration: 6 months. Expected survival probability: 8%. Marcus read the briefing packet, memorized every detail, and reported for deployment without hesitation. "Any questions?" his handler asked. "Just one. If I don't make it back, make sure my report gets through." "Whatever it takes." "That's not a question." "No. It's not." Thessaly 4 had been a human colony world before the Corvani invasion. Population: 2 million. Now it was an occupied territory, its survivors pressed into labor camps, its cities converted into military installations. The Corvani had been thorough in their conquest and thorough in their security measures. Marcus landed on the planet's surface via high-altitude drop pod, touching down in the wilderness zone between 2 major Corvani installations. The impact jarred his still-healing body, sent fresh waves of pain through his damaged nerves. He ignored them. For 3 weeks, he moved through enemy territory like a ghost. He traveled by night, hid by day, lived on whatever he could forage from the alien landscape. The Corvani patrols passed within meters of his hiding spots. Their sensor sweeps washed over him. None of them detected his presence. He had learned something in those 20 days of captivity: how to become small. How to silence the part of himself that screamed for notice, for significance, for survival. How to reduce his existence to a single purpose and let everything else fall away. The weapons facility was exactly where intelligence had suggested, a massive underground complex beneath what had once been the colony's capital city. Security was extraordinary. Multiple perimeter fences, drone patrols, biometric checkpoints, and a garrison of over 10,000 Corvani soldiers. Any sane operative would have reported the facility's existence and awaited extraction. Mission accomplished. Intelligence gathered. Marcus wasn't interested in the easy path. He spent 2 weeks observing the facility, mapping patrol routes, identifying weaknesses in the security grid. He tracked supply convoys, noted shift changes, cataloged the routine of the guards. He built a comprehensive picture of the installation's operations, and he found a way in. The sewage system. It was undignified. It was dangerous. It required Marcus to spend 14 hours submerged in waste products, breathing through a makeshift filtration mask, navigating tunnels so narrow that he had to dislocate his own shoulder to pass through certain sections. But it got him inside. The interior of the Corvani weapons facility was unlike anything Marcus had expected. He had anticipated sterile military corridors, harsh lighting, the cold efficiency of a war machine. What he found was something far more complex. The facility wasn't just a weapons development center. It was a research institution, a cultural archive, a repository of Corvani knowledge stretching back millennia. As Marcus moved through its lower levels, still coated in filth from his journey through the sewers, he passed laboratories where scientists worked on projects that seemed to have nothing to do with warfare. He saw libraries filled with crystal and data storage units. He saw what appeared to be art galleries, displaying works from dozens of conquered civilizations. And he saw prisoners. Not human prisoners, those were held in separate facilities, he knew. These were Corvani prisoners. Beings who wore the same chitinous carapace as their captors but who were clearly being held against their will. They were kept in comfortable cells, provided with food and entertainment, but the energy barriers that contained them left no doubt about their status. Political prisoners, Marcus realized. But Corvani weren't a monolithic empire. They had internal divisions, factions, dissidents. And this facility served, in part, as a prison for those who had fallen out of favor with the ruling class. The implications were significant. But Marcus filed them away for later analysis. He had a mission to complete. Over the next several days, he moved through the facility like a specter. He hacked into data terminals, downloaded intelligence on weapons projects that would give Earth's forces a significant advantage. He mapped the facility's layout, identified critical systems, noted vulnerabilities that could be exploited in a future attack. He gathered enough intelligence to justify a dozen missions. And then, he found her. The chamber was deep in the facility's central section, behind multiple layers of security that Marcus bypassed with painstaking care. It appeared to be a private residence, luxurious by Corvani standards, with organic furniture and bioluminescent lighting. But the energy barrier across the entrance made its true purpose clear. A prison. A gilded cage. The occupant sat in the center of the room, manipulating a holographic display with delicate movements of her manipulator limbs. She was Corvani, but different from the soldiers and scientists Marcus had observed. Her carapace was more refined, patterned with subtle colors that marked her as something significant. Her movements had an elegance that spoke of breeding and training. She looked up as Marcus approached, and, for a long moment, they simply stared at each other. "A human," she said, her translator rendering her voice with unusual clarity, "a high-quality device, fitting for someone of her apparent status. Here. In the heart of our most secure facility." She tilted her head, a gesture Marcus had learned to recognize as curiosity. "How did you get in?" Marcus considered his options. He could simply move on, continue his mission, leave this prisoner to her fate. It was the tactical choice. The smart choice. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the isolation he had experienced during his own captivity. Maybe it was simple curiosity. Maybe it was something else entirely, some instinct that whispered this encounter was important. "The sewers," he said. She made a sound that her translator rendered as laughter. "Of course. The sewers. The one path no Corvani would consider, because no Corvani could endure it. But, a human." She studied him with new interest. "You are the one they talk about. The one who would not break." Marcus felt a chill run through him. "How do you know about that?" "My uncle is Vex in AR. The interrogator who spent 20 days trying to extract your secrets." She rose from her seat, approaching the energy barrier with careful grace. "He has spoken of you often, since that experience. You fascinated him. Disturbed him. He said that you showed him something about humans that changes everything. And, what was that? That your species cannot be conquered. Not truly. Not in the way that matters." She pressed one limb against the barrier, the energy field crackling softly. "You can be killed, yes. Your worlds can be taken. Your people can be enslaved. But there is something in you, some core of resistance, that refuses to submit. My uncle believes that engaging humanity was the Corvani Empire's greatest mistake." Marcus processed this information slowly. The niece of his torturer. A Corvani royal, from her bearing and accommodations. Imprisoned in her own people's facility. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Vex Kara. Third in line to the imperial throne. Formerly third in line, I should say. I have been removed from the succession." A note of bitterness entered her translated voice. "My crime was advocating for peace with your species. I argued that humans represented an existential threat to our empire, not because of your military capabilities, which are inferior, but because of what you represent. An example. A demonstration that conquest can be resisted. You were imprisoned for wanting peace? I was imprisoned for weakness. For suggesting that the empire might not triumph. For implying that there are limits to our power. Vexkira's mandibles clicked in what Marcus recognized as a Corvani grimace. The High Command does not tolerate doubt. Especially not from the Imperial family. Marcus stood in silence, considering the implications. A peace faction within the Corvani Empire. A royal prisoner who had been punished for speaking truth to power. An opportunity that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago. If you got out of here, he said slowly, if you reached human-controlled space, what would you do? I would do whatever was necessary to end this war. I would provide intelligence, offer myself as a bargaining chip, help broker a negotiation. Anything to prevent the mutual destruction that is coming if this conflict continues. Vexkira's eyes, large, multifaceted, utterly alien, fixed on him with intensity. The invasion of Earth is being prepared. A fleet larger than anything your species has faced. It will launch in 6 of your months. If it succeeds, humanity will be effectively destroyed. If it fails, and there is a significant chance of failure, given what we have learned about human resilience, the Corvani Empire will be fatally weakened. Our rivals will descend upon us like carrion feeders. Billions will die on both sides. And, you think peace is possible? I think it is the only rational option. But, rationality has never been the Empire's strength. She paused, her translator adding a note of careful hope to her next words. You could free me. The security codes for my barrier are stored in the central database. You have clearly demonstrated the ability to access such systems. We could escape together. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Everything in his training screamed that this was a trap. An obvious ploy to capture a human operative. A manipulation designed to extract him from the facility and into waiting hands. But something else whispered in his mind. The same cold, quiet voice that had sustained him through 20 days of torture. The voice that had led him to volunteer for the long march. The voice that had guided him through sewers and security systems to reach this very spot. This is why you're here, the voice said. Not just for intelligence. For this. The extraction point is 20 miles from here, Marcus said. 20 miles through enemy-controlled territory. You're not built for that kind of travel, your species isn't adapted for long-distance movement on foot. I'm injured, weakened, operating on minimal supplies. The chances of us both making it out are essentially zero. I understand. If we're caught, they won't just kill us. They'll make examples of us. Your torture will be worse than mine was. You're a traitor to your own people, and they'll want to make sure everyone knows the cost of that betrayal. I understand. You're asking me to risk everything I've accomplished on this mission. All the intelligence I've gathered, all the lives that information could save, the strategic advantage it represents. You're asking me to gamble it all on the possibility that you're telling the truth. Vexkira met his gaze without flinching. I am asking you to show mercy. To an enemy. To someone whose people have done terrible things to yours. Her voice softened through the translator. My uncle told me that you refused to break because you had found something inside yourself that could not be taken. Something that belonged only to you. I am asking you to prove that your humanity extends beyond mere survival. I am asking you to prove that you can be more than what we have made you. The words hung in the recycled air of the facility. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, some barrier he hadn't known was there, crumbling under the weight of those words. He had spent so long becoming hard. Becoming unbreakable. He had burned away everything soft in himself, everything vulnerable, everything that could be used against him. He had become exactly what he needed to be to survive. But, was that all he was? Was survival the only thing that mattered? The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. He had believed that. Had lived it. had made it the foundation of his new self. But, now, standing before this alien princess who was asking for the one thing he had never considered giving, mercy, he wondered if he had understood the words correctly. Maybe destroying your weak self didn't mean becoming merciless. Maybe it meant becoming strong enough to be merciful. Strong enough to take risks that went beyond mere survival. Strong enough to hope for something better than endless war and suffering. 20 miles, Marcus said quietly. Through hostile territory. With no support, minimal supplies, and every Corvani patrol in the region hunting for us once they discover you're gone. Yes. He reached for the terminal beside her cell, began inputting commands that he shouldn't have known how to enter. Then, we'd better get started. The escape went wrong almost immediately. They made it 200 meters from Vexkera's cell before the alarms triggered. Someone had noticed an anomaly in the security systems, a flag that Marcus's careful intrusions had failed to mask. Within minutes, the entire facility was on lockdown. Marcus had planned for this, he had always planned for things to go wrong, but the speed of the response exceeded his projections. Corvani soldiers flooded the corridors. Drone swarms swept through the ventilation systems. Sensor nets activated throughout the complex, searching for the human intruder and his unlikely companion. This way, Vexkera said, moving with surprising speed despite her species' reputation for poor endurance. There is a maintenance tunnel that leads to the surface. It is not on any official map, it was built during the original construction as an emergency escape route for the Imperial family. How do you know about it? Because I am Imperial family. And, because I spent the first 3 months of my imprisonment mapping every possible exit from this facility. Her mandibles clicked in what might have been a grim smile. I never stopped hoping that someone would come to rescue me. I just never imagined it would be a human. They ran. The maintenance tunnel was exactly where Vexkera had indicated, a narrow passage, barely wide enough for Marcus to squeeze through, leading upward through the rock beneath the facility. It was old and used, filled with the debris of decades of neglect. But, it was clear enough to navigate, and, more importantly, it was unmonitored. They emerged on the surface 3 kilometers from the facility's main entrance, in a section of the ruined city that had been largely abandoned. The sun was setting, painting the alien sky in shades of purple and gold. In any other circumstances, Marcus might have appreciated its beauty. 20 miles to the extraction point, he said, checking his equipment. We need to move. Now. Vexkera nodded, but Marcus could see that she was already struggling. The sprint through the facility had taxed her species' limited stamina. Her breathing was labored, her movements less graceful than they had been in her cell. I will slow you down, she said, reading his expression accurately. Perhaps you should leave me. Complete your mission. I can create a distraction, draw their attention while you escape. No. It is the logical, I said no. Marcus met her alien eyes with an intensity that silenced her. I didn't break you out of that cell just to leave you behind. We're doing this together, or we're not doing it at all. Why? You owe me nothing. I am your enemy. You were my enemy. Now you're my responsibility. He adjusted his pack, checked his weapons, oriented himself toward the distant mountains where the extraction point waited. Can you walk? Yes. But, not quickly. Then, we walk slowly. And, we don't stop until we get there. The first 5 miles were the easiest. They moved through the ruins of the human colony, using the shattered buildings for cover, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Corvani patrols would be most likely to search. Marcus fell into a rhythm he remembered from the long march training, steady pace, controlled breathing, awareness stretched in all directions. Vexkera struggled to keep up, but she didn't complain. Whatever else she was, Marcus realized, she was not weak. She had been imprisoned for her beliefs, cut off from her family and her people, facing an uncertain future. And, yet she kept moving, kept pushing forward, kept refusing to give up. Maybe we're not so different, Marcus thought. Maybe the only thing that matters is the decision to keep going. The search parties found them at mile 6. They came from the north, a squad of 8 Corvani soldiers, moving in a precise search pattern through the ruins. Marcus spotted them first, pulled Vexkera into the shadow of a collapsed wall, and they waited, barely breathing, as the aliens passed within 20 meters of their position. One of the soldiers paused, head tilting as if listening. Its sensor equipment swept the area. Marcus's hand closed around his knife. If they were discovered, he would create enough chaos for Vexkera to run. She knew the terrain, knew the language. She might be able to find another way out. The soldier moved on. They waited another 10 minutes before resuming their journey, moving even more carefully now. The search was intensifying. More patrols. More drones. The net was tightening around them. Mile 8. Mile 9. Mile 10. Halfway there. Vexkera stumbled on a broken section of road, going down hard. Marcus caught her before she could fall completely, taking her weight on his already damaged shoulder. Pain lanced through him, but he didn't let go. "I am sorry," she gasped. "I cannot. I am not built for this. Nobody is built for this. That's not the point." "What is the point?" Marcus helped her back to her feet, keeping one arm around her to provide support. "The point is that we keep going anyway. That's what makes us more than what we're built for." They continued. Mile 11 was where they encountered the checkpoint. A Corvani security post had been established at a critical junction, blocking the most direct route to the extraction point. 20 soldiers, heavy weapons, sensor equipment that would detect them long before they could get close enough for Marcus's stealth to matter. "We go around," Vexkera said, studying the position. "There is a path through the mountains, longer, more difficult, but unmonitored." "How much longer?" "Perhaps 5 additional miles. 25 miles total, instead of 20. Through mountain terrain, at night, with an exhausted alien princess and a body that was already pushed to its limits." Marcus felt the familiar weight of despair pressing down on him. The voice that whispered that this was impossible, that he should have left her behind, that he had made a fatal error. He acknowledged the voice, and dismissed it. "Show me the path," he said. The mountain route was worse than Marcus had imagined. The terrain was brutal, steep inclines, loose rock, narrow passages that required them to climb hand over foot. Vexkera's species was not designed for this kind of environment, and she struggled with every step. Marcus found himself carrying her over the worst sections, his injured body screaming in protest. But he didn't stop. Mile 12. Mile 13. Mile 14. The night deepened around them, and, with it came the cold. Thessaly IV's nights were frigid, temperatures dropping to levels that threatened both of their species. Marcus shared his emergency thermal blanket with Vexkera, accepting the bite of the cold against his own skin to keep her functioning. "Tell me about your world," she said at mile 15, her voice barely above a whisper. They had stopped in a small cave to rest, knowing that the search parties would catch up eventually if they didn't keep moving. "Tell me about Earth." Marcus considered the question. He had spent so long thinking about war, about survival, about the next mission. He had almost forgotten that there was a world worth fighting for. "It's beautiful," he said finally. "Green and blue and alive in ways that most planets aren't. We have these things called forests, massive collections of organisms called trees, stretching for thousands of miles. And oceans, so deep and vast that we still haven't explored most of them. And mountains like these, but covered in white frozen water that sparkles in the sunlight. It sounds peaceful. It wasn't always. Humans have a long history of fighting each other. Wars over territory, over resources, over ideas. We almost destroyed ourselves a few times." Marcus paused, remembering lessons from a childhood that seemed like another lifetime. "But we also built things. Created things. Made art and music and stories that tried to capture what it meant to be alive. We're contradictory that way. Capable of terrible destruction and incredible beauty. Like the Corvani," Vexkera said softly. "We tell ourselves that we are conquerors, that empire is our destiny. But we also have art, music, stories of our own. Somewhere beneath all the warfare, there are Corvani who just want to live, to create, to raise their offspring in peace. Then, why the conquest? Why the invasion? Because we are afraid. The admission seemed to cost her something. We are ancient humans. We have seen civilizations rise and fall across millennia. We have watched younger species grow strong and challenge us. And, somewhere along the way, we decided that the only way to survive was to control everything. To crush any potential threat before it could mature. And humans are a threat? Humans are the greatest threat we have ever faced. Not because of your technology or your military. Because of your nature. Your capacity for resistance. Your refusal to submit. Vexkera turned to look at him, her alien eyes reflecting the dim starlight that filtered into their cave. My uncle was right to be disturbed by you, Marcus Cole. Your species represents something that the Corvani Empire cannot tolerate, proof that conquest is not inevitable. Proof that resistance is possible. Marcus absorbed this in silence. He had never thought of himself as representing anything. He was just a man who had refused to break. A man who had found one thing inside himself that could not be taken. But maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. We should keep moving, he said finally. We're still 10 miles from the extraction point. Vexkera nodded, rising with obvious effort. Lead on, human. I will follow. Mile 16 brought the hunting party. They came out of the darkness without warning, a specialized pursuit team, 10 soldiers equipped for mountain terrain and trained for tracking prey through difficult environments. They had been following Marcus and Vexkera's trail for hours, and now they had caught up. Run, Marcus said, pushing Vexkera toward a narrow passage between two rock formations. I'll hold them off. You cannot run. She ran. Marcus turned to face the hunting party, his knife in one hand and his sidearm in the other. 10 against 1. No cover, no support, no chance of survival. But survival wasn't the point. It had never been the point. The first soldier charged, and Marcus met it with everything he had. His blade found the gap in its armor, and green ichor sprayed across his face. The second and third came together, and he took them both down in a whirl of violence that cost him 2 deep gashes across his torso. The fourth put a plasma bolt through his thigh, and he responded by putting 3 rounds through its head. 5 soldiers remained. Marcus was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his leg barely supporting his weight, his vision blurring from pain and blood loss. Any sane assessment would say that he was finished. Marcus Cole had stopped being sane a long time ago. He screamed a sound that was not quite human, not quite animal, but something older and deeper than either, and threw himself at the remaining soldiers. He killed 2 more before they brought him down, swarming over him with enough force to pin even his desperate resistance. The squad leader leaned over him, mandibles clicking in what might have been surprise. The human is still alive, it said. The princess must be nearby. Search the area. Marcus lay on the cold ground, blood pooling beneath him, and smiled. You'll never find her. We will. And, when we do, she will be made to watch as you are executed for your crimes against the Empire. Maybe. But you'll have to catch me first. And, with a surge of strength that should have been impossible, Marcus twisted free of the soldiers holding him, drove his knife into the squad leader's throat, and staggered toward the narrow passage where Vexkera had disappeared. Plasma bolts tracked past him. One caught his shoulder, another his side. He felt the impacts, registered them as damage, and kept moving. The darkness of the passage swallowed him, and he ran or tried to run, his wounded leg dragging, his body failing, but still moving, still going forward. He made it perhaps 100 meters before he collapsed. The world went gray, then black, and Marcus Cole lay bleeding on the cold stone of an alien world, certain that he had finally reached the end of his journey. Not yet, the cold voice whispered. Not yet. Marcus woke to the sensation of movement. He was being dragged, more accurately, through the narrow passage. His body was a symphony of pain, every nerve screaming in protest, every wound bleeding through inadequate field dressings. He should have been dead. By every medical metric he knew, he should have been dead hours ago. But he wasn't. Vexkira's face swam into focus above him. The Corvani princess was struggling to pull him forward, her species' limited physical strength barely sufficient to move his weight. Her own exhaustion was evident in every line of her body, but she kept pulling, kept dragging him toward the distant extraction point. "Stop," Marcus croaked. "Leave me. You can still make it." "No. I'm dead weight. Literally. You're burning energy you can't spare." "Then, I will burn it." Vexkira's translator rendered her voice with a fierce determination that Marcus recognized. He had heard it in his own voice, during those 20 days of interrogation. "You showed me mercy when you had no reason to. You risked everything, your mission, your life, your duty, to give me a chance at freedom. I will not abandon you now. It's not logical." "No. It is not." She kept pulling. "Perhaps I am learning something from humans." They moved through the passage, inch by inch, mile by agonizing mile. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of Vexkira's presence beside him, aware of the pain that suffused every moment, aware of the cold voice in his mind still whispering, "Not yet. Not yet." Mile 17. Mile 18. The passage opened onto a high ridge, and Marcus saw the dawn breaking over the alien landscape. The sky was painted in colors he didn't have names for, shades of light that seemed to promise something beyond the suffering of the night. For a moment, the beauty of it cut through his pain, through his exhaustion, through everything that had been done to him and everything he had done in return. "This is what we're fighting for," he thought. "Not just survival. Not just victory. This. The chance to see something beautiful, even in the midst of horror." "There," Vexkira said, pointing toward a distant valley. "The extraction point. Perhaps 3 more miles. 3 more miles. It might as well have been 300. Marcus couldn't walk. Could barely crawl. His body had given everything it had to give, and there was nothing left. "Leave me here," he said. "Take my beacon. Signal the extraction team. Tell them about the intelligence I gathered, it's stored in my pack, encrypted. They'll know how to access it. Tell them about you. About the peace faction. About the invasion fleet. I am not leaving you. Vexkira, no." The word came out as something between a scream and a sob, translated imperfectly through her device. "You do not understand. You do not understand what you represent. What you have shown me." She knelt beside him, her alien face close to his. "I was raised to believe that other species were inferior. That humans in particular were primitive, weak, destined to be conquered. And then, I learned about you. About the man who would not break. About the human who found something inside himself that could not be taken." "I'm not special," Marcus whispered. "I'm just stubborn. You are more than stubborn. You are proof." Vexkira's voice cracked with emotion that transcended species barriers. "Proof that strength is not about power. That courage is not about victory. That mercy can exist even in the heart of war. You showed me mercy when I was your enemy. Now I show you the same. This is what you have given me, Marcus Cole. This is what you have taught me. And I will not let you die believing that it meant nothing." She grabbed his arms and pulled. Marcus felt himself moving again, felt the rocks scraping against his back, felt the blood leaving his body in a steady stream. The world was fading around him, colors bleeding into gray, sounds becoming distant and muffled. But he could still feel her pulling. Still feel her refusing to give up. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. The words echoed in his mind, taking on new meaning. He had always interpreted them as a call to hardness, to invulnerability, to becoming something that could not be hurt. But now, in this moment, he understood them differently. His weak self had not been his capacity for pain. It had not been his physical limitations or his emotional vulnerabilities. His weak self had been his belief that he had to face everything alone. His weak self had been his conviction that mercy was weakness. His weak self had been the wall he had built around his heart, the isolation he had chosen as protection. And, now, in the arms of an enemy who had become something else, something harder to define but infinitely more precious, that weak self was finally dying. "Help me up," Marcus said. "You cannot walk. Help me up anyway." Vexkira supported him as he struggled to his feet. The pain was beyond description, beyond anything he had experienced even in the torture chambers of the Corvani facility. But he stood. He took a step. Then, another. "Together," he said. "We finish this together." They walked. The last 3 miles took 4 hours. They leaned on each other, human and Corvani, former enemies united by something that neither of them could name. When Marcus stumbled, Vexkira caught him. When Vexkira's strength failed, Marcus found reserves he didn't know he possessed. They fell and rose, stopped and started, pushed beyond every limit that biology and physics should have imposed. The Corvani search parties found them at mile 24. A full company this time, over 100 soldiers, supported by aerial drones and armored vehicles. They emerged from the morning mist like ghosts of war, surrounding the two fugitives in a ring of weapons and hostility. Marcus and Vexkira stood at the center of the circle, holding each other upright. There was nowhere to run. No more clever escapes, no more hidden passages. This was the end. The company commander approached, its translator crackling to life. "Princess Vexkira, you are ordered to return to custody. The human will be executed immediately." "No," Vexkira said. "This is not a negotiation." "It is now." She straightened, and, despite her exhaustion, despite her injuries, there was something regal in her bearing. Something that made the soldiers hesitate. "I am third in line to the imperial throne. My removal from the succession was political, not legal. I still possess certain authorities." The commander's mandibles clicked uncertainly. "What authorities?" "The authority to grant mercy. The ancient right of the imperial bloodline to spare the lives of enemies who have shown honor in battle." Vexkira's voice grew stronger, more commanding. "This human infiltrated our most secure facility. He evaded capture for weeks in hostile territory. He fought his way through our soldiers and refused to abandon me even when doing so would have saved his own life. By the old codes, the codes that the Empire was built upon, he has earned the right to mercy. The old codes are forgotten. The High Command does not. The High Command can dispute my authority after the fact. But, in this moment, on this ground, I invoke the ancient right." Vexkira's eyes swept across the assembled soldiers. "Any who interfere are committing treason against the imperial bloodline. Is that a risk you wish to take, Commander? For one human? For one execution?" The silence stretched. Marcus watched the calculation play out across the commander's features. Vexkira was right. The political risk of defying an imperial princess, even a disgraced one, was significant. The soldiers in this company would have to file reports, answer questions, justify their actions to superiors who might not support them. "Let them pass," the commander said finally. "The High Command will be informed. The consequences will be theirs to determine." The ring of soldiers parted. Marcus and Vexkira walked through, neither looking back, neither speaking. The extraction point was visible now, a small clearing where a human shuttle waited, its engines humming with readiness. They made it. The shuttle pilot was a young woman named Chen, barely 25, who stared at the bloody human and the Corvani princess with undisguised shock. "Sir, I was only briefed to extract you." "There was no mention of change of plans," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. "She's coming with us. She has intelligence that will save millions of lives." "Sir, I don't have authorization." "Then, get authorization. Contact command. Tell them we have a Corvani defector with information about the invasion fleet." Marcus collapsed into a seat, his body finally giving up its last reserves of strength. Tell them Marcus Cole sends his regards. Chen hesitated a moment longer, then moved to the cockpit. The shuttle lifted off, rising above the alien landscape, climbing toward the stars. Vexkera sat beside Marcus, watching the world she had known shrink beneath them. She was leaving everything, her family, her people, her entire existence, for an uncertain future among enemies. "Thank you," Marcus said. "I should be thanking you. We saved each other. That's how it's supposed to work." He managed a weak smile. "You were right, about what I showed you. But you showed me something too." "What?" "That mercy isn't weakness. That showing compassion to an enemy isn't betrayal of your own people. It's the opposite, it's proving that we're worth fighting for. That there's something in us worth preserving." He reached out, and, after a moment, Vexkera took his hand. The contact was strange alien physiology against human, but somehow right. "We're going to end this war. Together. Not with more violence, but with proof that there's another way." "You believe that's possible?" "I believe we just proved it's possible." Marcus looked out the viewport at the stars, at the vast universe that held both their species. 20 days in a torture chamber, and I learned that I couldn't be broken. 20 miles through enemy territory, and I learned that I couldn't do it alone. And, somewhere along the way, I learned that the man who destroys his weak self doesn't become merciless, he becomes strong enough to show mercy. Vexkera was quiet for a long moment. "Then, your species has a phrase. I learned it from my uncle's files. Humanity, fuck yeah. Is that applicable here?" Marcus laughed, a painful, ragged sound that nonetheless held genuine joy. Yeah, I think that's applicable." The war did not end overnight. When Marcus and Vexkera arrived at Earth's military command, they were met with suspicion and hostility. Many in the defense establishment saw the Corvani princess as a trick, a Trojan horse sent to undermine humanity from within. Marcus was questioned, investigated, his loyalty challenged at every turn. But the intelligence Vexkera provided was too valuable to ignore. The invasion fleet's exact composition and trajectory. The weaknesses in Corvani command structure. The existence of the peace faction and its potential as allies. Slowly, grudgingly, the military began to listen. And then, something remarkable happened. Word of Marcus's story spread. Not just through official channels, but through the informal networks of soldiers and civilians, carried by word of mouth and encrypted messages. The tale of the man who would not break. The tale of the human who showed mercy to an enemy. The tale of the 20-mile march that changed everything. The Corvani heard the stories too. At first, the High Command dismissed them as propaganda. Typical human myth-making, designed to boost morale. But the stories kept spreading, even among Corvani soldiers. The image of a wounded human and a disgraced princess, walking together through hostile territory, leaning on each other for support, it resonated with something that the Empire had tried to suppress. Something older than conquest. Something deeper than war. The peace faction grew. It started slowly, a few officers questioning orders, a few scientists sharing unauthorized data with human counterparts. But it accelerated as the invasion fleet approached Earth and the reality of the coming battle became clear. The Corvani Empire was about to commit itself to a war that it might win, but that would certainly destroy it. 3 days before the fleet was scheduled to attack, High Commander Vexkera's father, the Emperor himself, made an unprecedented decision. He called for a ceasefire. The negotiations took months. There were setbacks, betrayals, moments when the whole fragile process seemed destined to collapse. But, throughout it all, two figures remained constant: Marcus Cole, the human who would not break, and Vexkera, the princess who had chosen peace. They became symbols. Living proof that cooperation was possible. That enemies could become allies. That mercy was not weakness, but the ultimate strength. The Treaty of Thessaly was signed 1 year after Marcus's escape from the weapons facility. It wasn't perfect. Decades of war couldn't be erased with a document. There were those on both sides who resented the peace, who wanted vengeance, who saw the treaty as betrayal. The rebuilding would take generations. But it was a beginning. Marcus stood at the signing ceremony, wearing the dress uniform of a Earth Defense Force that he barely recognized. He had been promoted, decorated, celebrated. None of it felt real. What felt real was the alien hand that held his own Vexkera, standing beside him, wearing the formal garments of a Corvani Imperial ambassador. "We did it," she said quietly. "We did. When you freed me from that cell, did you imagine it would lead to this?" Marcus considered the question. That night in the weapons facility felt like a lifetime ago. He had been a different person then, harder, colder, more certain that survival was all that mattered. "No," he admitted. "I didn't imagine any of this. I was just doing what felt right. Following an instinct I couldn't explain. The instinct for mercy. Maybe. Or maybe just the instinct to stop fighting for one moment. To see the person in front of me instead of the enemy." He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't know what it was. I just know it changed everything. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," Vexkera quoted. "That was the phrase you taught me, was it not?" "It is. But I understand it differently now. Tell me." Marcus looked out at the assembled dignitaries, humans and Corvani, standing together in a room that should have been a battlefield. He saw the future taking shape, imperfect and uncertain, but real. Possible. Worth fighting for. "The weak self isn't your capacity for pain," he said slowly, finding the words as he spoke them. "It isn't your fear, or your doubt, or your vulnerability. The weak self is the part of you that believes you have to face everything alone. That believes mercy is weakness. That believes survival is all that matters. And, when you destroy that weak self, you become strong enough to reach out. Strong enough to trust. Strong enough to take risks that go beyond your own survival." Marcus turned to face her, and, in her alien eyes, he saw something that transcended species, transcended the scars of war, transcended everything that should have made them enemies. "You become strong enough to love." Vexkera's mandibles clicked in the gesture Marcus had learned to recognize as a smile. "Is that what this is, Marcus Cole? Love? I don't know what to call it. But I know that when I was bleeding out on that mountain, when I should have died a dozen times over, I kept going because of you. Not for the mission. Not for Earth. For you. And I pulled you through miles of hostile territory, exhausting every reserve I possessed, because of you." She leaned closer, her alien form pressing against his human one in a gesture that should have been awkward but felt like coming home. "Perhaps love is not the wrong word." "No," Marcus agreed. "Perhaps it's not." Years passed. The peace held, strengthened by the example of those who had made it possible. Humans and Corvani learned to coexist, then, to cooperate, then, to build something together that neither species could have achieved alone. There were setbacks and challenges, but the foundation that Marcus and Vexkera had laid proved stronger than any obstacle. Marcus was eventually promoted to admiral, then retired to a quiet life on a colony world where humans and Corvani lived as neighbors. Vexkera served as ambassador for 2 decades, then joined him in retirement. They built a home together, a strange hybrid structure that accommodated both species' needs, filled with art from both cultures and memories from their shared history. They never forgot the 20 miles. On the anniversary of their escape, every year, they would walk together. Just a few miles, nothing like the desperate march that had nearly killed them both. But enough to remember. Enough to honor what they had been through. "Tell me again," Vexkera would say. "Tell me about the weak self." And Marcus would tell her. About the torture chambers and the unbreakable core. About the long march and the decision to keep going. About the moment in her cell when he had chosen mercy over mission. About the mountain, and the dawn, and the realization that he could not do it alone. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, he would say. Because the weak self is what makes you isolate. What makes you harden. What makes you believe that survival is all there is. When you destroy that weak self, you become capable of connection, of trust, of love, and of mercy. Especially of mercy. Marcus would take her hand, as he had taken it in the shuttle, as he had taken it at the treaty signing, as he had taken it 1,000 times since. Mercy for enemies. Mercy for ourselves. Mercy for the universe that seems so determined to break us. We are still here, Vexkera would observe. Still unbroken. Still unbroken. And they would walk, together, through whatever landscape they found themselves in. Two beings from different worlds, different species, different histories, united by 20 miles of pain that had become the foundation of something beautiful. Something that could never be destroyed. Epilogue: the monument was built on Thessaly 4, at the exact spot where Marcus had collapsed in the mountain passage. It was a simple structure, two figures, human and Corvani, supporting each other as they walked. Beneath them, carved in both languages, were the words that had defined them: the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. In memory of mercy. In honor of those who chose connection over isolation, love over fear, peace over war. Humanity and Corvani walking together. Students from both species made pilgrimages to the site. They would walk the 20 miles, as Marcus and Vexkera had walked them, experiencing for themselves the terrain that had nearly claimed 2 lives. Some found it transformative. Others found it merely exhausting. All of them came away with a deeper understanding of what was possible when beings chose to see each other as persons rather than enemies. Marcus Cole died on a quiet evening, 30 years after the Treaty of Thessaly. Vexkera held his hand as he passed, her alien features wet with tears that her species was not supposed to be capable of shedding. "I will see you again," she whispered. "Somewhere beyond the stars." "I know," he said. "I'll be waiting." His last words were a smile. Vexkera lived another century, her species' longer lifespan carrying her far beyond her human partner. But she never stopped telling their story. Never stopped teaching the lessons they had learned together. Never stopped demonstrating, through her own life, that mercy was the ultimate strength. When she finally passed, she was buried beside him, 2 monuments, human and Corvani, standing together for eternity. The inscription on her grave read, "She learned mercy from a human. She taught mercy to an empire. She proved that love transcends all boundaries." And the inscription on his, "He would not break. He chose mercy. He walked 20 miles and changed the universe. The man who destroyed his weak self could never be destroyed by others. And so he lives on." The end.